let's talk a little bit about targets. And this one's tricky because I feel like so often we're given targets, we're handed targets, and there's not a lot of ownership. We know what students need to score on the map, and we know what students need to, where they need to be if they're Lexile. Like we're kind of handed all of these places where students should be. So it would be really easy to just skip over this section entirely. But that would be a shame, you know?
Yeah. Because I think right now we are much more target oriented as educators. We're held to standards, which on the whole is a good thing. But what becomes unclear, I think, often is how do we get to the standard? So what I love is those benchmarks, those interim assessments, and then again, this is a special educator in me. Let's backwards map. Let's break down that standard. How are we going to actually get there? We all want to get there. But like you mentioned, using data daily, what did today's data, what did today's exit ticket tell me as a teacher? Before EdTech, before digital revolution, before Chromebooks, teachers were still making decisions every day very effectively. It was time consuming, but that was the dedication to the job. And the good news is that as you digitize a lot of that, not all of it, but as you digitize a lot of it, you get your results in seconds. And you used to spend, like, I know you've told me, you take your papers out with you and like you're going to the, to the picnic, to the happy hour, to whatever, like I'm grading and I'm listening. Now you don't have to do that as much. You have the data already. But it starts with the targets. And I'd love to hear you talk a little bit about the 5 Ws. I know that that's something that you speak really well to. So maybe pick up that thread.
Yeah, I, in thinking about what goes into a target, there's so many little components that are just, again, really easy to smooth over. Let's say we're talking about, as a school, we've decided that one of our kind of power standards is going to be fractions. Like our students struggle with fractions, ratios, percentages like year over year. So as a whole school, we're really going to dive into that. Great. That sounds like a really great aspirational goal. What does it look like? So when you break that down, we need to figure out like, well, what are we actually tracking? Are we looking at students' homework completion when it comes to their fraction homework? Are we looking at, do we have an online like learning platform that they're going to be completing fractions modules in? What are we measuring? I think that's a big one. How is it getting measured? Is this manual data from like teachers entering it into a chart paper? Is it a spreadsheet? Is it a Google sheet that we're all editing? How is that data being collected is important. How often? Is this a thing? Are we looking at this weekly? Should every teacher be teaching fractions weekly, or is this every month, or is it just in third quarter? So every single one of these W's, the who, what, where, when, why, and even how, becomes really critical when you're talking about targets, because if you don't lay those all out, it becomes really hard to get on the same page and to really start rowing together as a school to make some of those big changes happen. And it can lead to, this teacher's teaching awesomely, but is capturing data in a really different way than this other teacher, which is, and then it's really hard to see.
Exactly. It's like we need those connected data systems that put all the data in one place and standardize it. So you can come to the PLC meeting with standardized data and things that allow you to tag your data by a common standard or by, like you said, that focus standard, fractions. It doesn't have to be in the full Common Core or the full state standard. It can be your shorthand, which is whatever, fractions. Now, of course, I can't think of something off the top of my head, but, informational text, key details. You're using that teacher shorthand. You need a data tool that allows you to track everything that you're already doing. So when you come together as a team, you can see those data points.
Yeah. And there's that shared aspect. And again, we're building on trust here. If we come together and set these targets and these benchmarks, and like every month we're making incremental improvement, A, the trust has to be there. And B, I think it would be really hard if if a community of teachers, let's say a grade level team, was given okay, your students need to be reading at a 1030 Lexile by May 31st. thinking like, it's August, like that's a really long ways away,
Yeah.
setting those monthly incremental targets, setting those interim goals that we can celebrate progress, thinking about targets as a progression, not just that last day of school endpoint. I mean, just like we tell students, to celebrate their small learning progress over time. Don't just take that last end of the year test as or your final grade as like your worth or your value,
Right.
Same here. I feel like we're going to be talking a lot about how like a community of teachers looks a lot like a community of students, and
It really does.
the things we do so naturally for students, we have a really hard time doing to ourselves, right? Yeah.
Mhm. That's like teacher self-care is treating yourself with the same respect and giving yourself the time to learn that you give to your students. You don't expect them to learn it on the first day, and you give them lots of tools and resources. You let them know where they are. That's the shared targets part, the visibility, the trust. So let's talk about how we get there.